since I uploaded my last video, and I've already gotten about 12 views, which is quite interesting. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it. Well, here are some high school stories from, well, a few years ago now. I remember we had in our high school this building, and in this building there was actually a cafe of sorts, and it wasn't a fully fledged cafe per se, but it was rather a coffee machine, somewhere to grind the coffee beans. It was a sink and a bench. And you're probably wondering, well, aren't you lucky in your high school you had a cafe? Well, it wasn't for students, it was actually for the teachers. And so this is when you think to yourself, oh, well, you had a staff working at a little cafe, making coffee for your teachers. How fortunate are they? Well, no, not quite. You see, this was a cafe that was run in sorts by students. And when I say run, I mean once a week, I believe it was Friday, where the teachers would congregate in this room, because this whole cafe was actually in a sort of meeting room of sorts. And there, as they would talk amongst themselves, nothing formal, it was just gossip and news of the week and that sort of thing, the students would diligently take their orders and serve them their coffee. And of course this interested me rather greatly because, well, a lot of people enjoy coffee in my part of the world, and coffee culture was quite strong. At the time, I was not a coffee drinker myself. I would always love a good hot chocolate or something like that on a cold day. But I realized that it wouldn't be the worst skill, to learn how to make a cup of coffee. And so one day the teachers had a little announcement. They said, if you are in, goodness, it was either the 9th grade or the 10th grade. I think it was 10th grade. No, 9th grade, yes. I think it was 9th grade. Never mind. The point is, somewhere between the 9th and 10th grade, they said, we are looking for people who want to work at the cafe in the staff meeting area, who would be interested. Anyone who wanted to do this would just come to this meeting, and the teachers would sort of determine the most suitable 12 candidates to actually join this barista team, if you will. And so I honestly didn't think I would be selected. Must have been 20 or so, maybe more. And I thought, well, I'm not a coffee drinker, I don't have any experience in this sort of thing. But actually, it wasn't necessarily to serve at the coffee place immediately. Rather, you would be trained at a special facility. And once you've acquired all of the skills needed, well, then you would actually serve coffee to the teachers. Well, in this meeting there were many people, many of them had hospitality experience. I'm sure some of them did. There was one kid, of course, who made a joke about putting rat poison in the teacher's coffee. I think we all knew it was a joke, but the teachers in the room disliked that comment so much that he was excused from participating in such an activity. And I'm not actually quite sure by which metric, by which sort of measure they chose these candidates, but I was one of them. I was one of the people who would become part of the barista team. And so, what I found, which was really quite interesting, is they actually gave us a day of school, a day off of school, to go to this facility. We all hopped in somebody's car, one of the teachers' cars, and we drove all the way out. Oh, there might have been a few cars actually, if there were 12 of us, but never mind. The point is, sooner or later, somehow we drove for, I want to say, about an hour, and we ended up in this coffee training facility, and they sat us down and they told us the science behind coffee beans, and they told us about all of the types of coffee, what's the difference between a latte and a flat white, and all that sort of thing. Anyways, so you've got your beans, and there were about, I don't know, 10 or so coffee machines lined up across two benches, and there were big garbage bins next to them. And admittedly, it wasn't the best use of beans and milk, but we got to practice making all sorts of coffees on these machines. And once you had made your coffee, you could either drink it or pour it away, but the idea was you would sit down. It was actually, you stood up and you made maybe 10 or 15 cups of coffee just to get the hang of it, which I did, admittedly rather poorly. And as a result, after doing this, eventually after having our instructor come around and inspect our coffees, eventually we were given a little slip, and it was actually a qualification that says, yep, I've completed the coffee course, I know what I'm doing. And I remember feeling quite pleased, because the instructor told us, he goes, you can go to any cafe and show them this slip, and they will know exactly what kind of a course you have done, and they will recognize it, and they will say, oh, so you do know what you're doing, at least to some kind of a degree, which I always found which was pretty cool, even though I haven't actually gotten an official job as a barista ever. I am perfectly qualified, so it seems. Anyways, it occurs to me that I haven't actually, even though this was supposed to be a video about my high school experiences, it occurs to me that I haven't really been talking much about high school, and I have been talking a lot about coffee. But this was something which did happen entirely within the bounds of high school. So, yes, and so you're probably wondering, okay, so you've learned how to this place. Now what happens next? Well, what happens next is basically it was every Friday at about 10 in the morning. I was excused from class. Eventually all of my teachers got to understand this perfectly well, and it was kind of normal for good old me to just get up and leave class at 10 in the morning on a Friday. Well, of course they would know, because they would see me there giving them a coffee an hour later, because at 11 a.m. it was recess, and that is when the teachers would congregate for their meeting. And so I would we'd have to get the keys. We'd have to get the keys from the appropriate staff room to unlock this little cafe. And there were always, even though there were only about 12, I think, originally. For some reason, I think a lot of people either lost interest or were caught out of the loop or didn't really understand the premise of this entire exercise. I don't know. But either way, really it was reduced to 4, 5 of us. But the actual barista sort of the cafe required about 4 people to run it. The first person would be in charge of taking down orders, and also they'd be in charge of payments. Coffee wasn't free, of course, and they'd be in charge of, I believe we had some sort of a mock loyalty card system going. So we would stamp off little numbers until somebody got a free coffee. And that was the first station. The second station was just in charge of grinding out beans and getting shots of coffee pumped out of the machine. That was the whole job. If you could do that, well, it was pretty simple, pretty laborious, but it was somewhat satisfying, grinding the beans, pushing all the buttons, and then there's a little paddle that you had to flip to get the ground beans into the little, I don't even know what that thing's called, the thing where you put the coffee beans into before you put it into the machine. Anyway, that. And also, after you did that, then you had to tamper it, which means you sort of just compress the coffee grounds together within this little device, and then you had to sort of place this whole thing into the coffee machine itself, push a button, and hot water would flow through. And of course, when the hot water flows through these coffee grounds, it gives you a shot of coffee. The next station after that was the milk. Now this was the most interesting station, and I quite liked doing this. It was my favorite job, actually. And I'd love to tell you why it was my favorite job, but I realize I've been rambling for almost 17 minutes now, so